Yeah. Okay, so does it change for TV? Right?
So it's not.
We're live. You want me to message Steve?
Yeah. Oh, check me.
I would try to see that. We're live. We can use my.
Yeah. I didn't even realize that you were good. What's he joining?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
No. I love them. There's a woman in that. I just feel the belly waist. So I might have met you, but yeah, yeah. Yeah. Well, it's now. But so I knew about this. Yeah, I know. Yeah. But what did she like? That's always on. Yeah, I don't want it. Tell me. Information. Okay. Yes. Yeah. I mean, everybody's talking about. No. Yeah, I apologize. Yeah, it's coffee. Yeah. Oh, it's coffee. Okay.
I love the, Oh, I'm doing it. You should pop that mic there. I'll give you just give a 30 seconds by or so. You might have the mic off.
You can see your total.
I can hear you guys.
What is he gonna get back to me about?
That's good.
What you sent me your questions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I
That's another question. Do you happen to know, I was talking to Lindsay yesterday about the cemetery. Do you happen to know who owns the land down below Iona?
I don't know how.
I'm gonna check YouTube, guys.
Like, I know, like.
We're so broke, looking at selling some land.
So sorry.
And what the, well, it's the same.
No, I've got my, oh, I do, sorry.
everyone, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting on January the 14th. It is exactly 8:30 and the chair calls this meeting to order. Situated in ancestral lands. And as such, of conflict of interest, you may do so now. And I don't see anything, so we'll move on. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the Committee of the Whole on December the 3rd, 2024?
To that.
Sorry.
Hmm.
Go ahead, sorry.
I move that the minutes of December 3rd, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting be approved as circulated or amended.
And can I have a seconder for that? Councillor Van Niekerk, thank you. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And that is carried. Can I have a mover for the Committee of the Whole in-camera minutes, December the 3rd, 2024? Councillor Elliott? So, did you want to read those?
Oh, absolutely. Move that the minutes of December 3rd, 2024 Committee of the Whole in-camera meeting be approved as circulated and or amended.
Thank you. And can I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mayor McKay. And are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
And that is carried. And we just have one presentation this morning. That is from PVSC, the Property Valuation Services Corporation. We have Paul Beasley, the Municipal Account Manager, and Andrew Wilsley, the Assistant Director. So I will leave it to you and let you take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just gonna move it this way and maybe move around a little bit. Is that okay? Picking me up okay? It sounds like it is. So council, your worship, and staff and any others that are here with us today, thank you very much for having us here today. I'm Paul Beasley, as mentioned, and I'm looking forward to presenting the 2025 assessment role. And I know that some of you are new, some of the councilors here are new, so we're going to walk through a presentation that's going to let you know a little bit about PVSC, and then we'll talk a little bit about the numbers as well for 2025. And it's a little longer presentation than the time allotment, so I'll go through it very quickly, but feel free to ask questions along the way, and we'll try to keep it within that 15-20 minutes approximately. So I guess about myself a little bit, I've been with PVSC for 9 years now. Regional account manager, and I guess I have a little bit of a unique perspective. Some of you are probably already aware, but I was the mayor of the town of Windsor for 8 years and a councillor for 4 years. So whether positive or negative, I bring that perspective to the table at PVSC. So I see it as positive because I've walked in your shoes and I know exactly what you do around the council table, and you know, I was part of Towns Caucus and those types of things as well. So, and I really enjoy going to the conferences as well and talking to all you folks when I'm there. Andrew, you want to say a few words about yourself?
My name's Andrew Wilsey. I've been with PVSC for just over 16 years. Started in 2006 as a summer student, and hired on in 2008 and was a field assessor, team lead a couple of years ago, and moved into this position for maybe almost a year this summer. So just looking forward to the presentation. Any questions you might have?
Thank you, Andrew. And I guess if you've been listening to the media the last 24 hours or so, you would have heard a little bit about assessment services, and that we sent out a media release yesterday. And in that media release, one of the main highlights was that the 2025 assessment roll reflects a steady residential market growth, especially in towns outside of the Halifax Regional Municipality. So, and that is true of Wolfville as well. So what we've seen is that it seems that the ripple effect from Halifax on out has certainly occurred, and in particular this year, it seems like the towns have had a little more activity, a little more sales activity, and have outpaced as far as assessment lift this year. So we'll move to the presentation here. Andrew, if you want to go to the next. So basically, the high level view for those of you that haven't sat in on any of our presentations before, it all starts with the legislation that the province of Nova Scotia has established for assessment, the Assessment Act. We, as the number 2 circle there, PVSC, we assess the value of all the properties across the province. We provide those assessed values to the municipalities, yourself, number 3. You determine what your budget requirements are. You take the assessed values, you take your budget requirements, and that's how you establish your tax rates after much due diligence and a great amount of work by yourself and by staff and everything else. And I know how difficult it is making sure that tax rate's just right with those budgets. And finally, the last piece of the picture, probably the most important, is that the property owners actually get their bills and pay the taxes so that you can provide the service necessary for the town. So about PVSC, we were created under the Property Valuation Service Corporation Act, and we're responsible for assessing all the properties in Nova Scotia, some 650,000 properties across the province. We're municipally funded. All 49 municipalities fund PVSC. We're governed by a board of directors, some of which are elected municipal officials. Some are staff from around the province, and municipal staff, and some are private sector individuals who volunteer to be on the board. We've got approximately 130 employees, and they live in 62 communities across Nova Scotia. I'm in Windsor, Andrew's in the Colebrook area, and we're pretty much wherever we need to be in Nova Scotia, we're there. So what we do and what we don't do, a little bit of differentiation between what the PVSC function is versus the municipal function or even a provincial function. We deliver the assessment roll to all 49 municipalities. We deliver the 650,000 assessment notices, which were sent out yesterday. That's why there's quite a bit of media coverage about assessment services. So people will be getting their notices in the mail as we speak, and also, they can access the information online at the website as well. And we administer the capped assessment program. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes, and the seasonal business tourist designation program. What we don't do is we don't set the tax rates. We don't collect taxes. We don't create tax policy. We don't provide tax relief. We get quite a few calls saying, what can you do to help me with my taxes? Well, all we can do is say, let's talk about your assessment and your assessed value and your house. If they want to talk about tax rates, we have to refer them to the municipality in order to do that. And we don't determine land ownership. That's the land registry does that. So bit of a line there, and sometimes it's confusing to property owners. The Nova Scotia Assessment Act requires that we assess property at market value. So on your assessment, there is a market value assessment, but we also administer the cap. So there is a capped assessment as well if you are eligible for cap. But we assess at market value. I'm not going to get into too much about this, but essentially our market values are 1 year back. We have a market value date 1 year prior to the roll going out. So January 1st, 2024 was the market value date for January 2025 roll when we sent it out. All right, Andrew. And we use mass appraisal. Mass appraisal is the process of valuing a group of properties as of a given date using common data, standardized methods, and statistical testing. So the given date is essentially 1 year back. And we value groups of properties within neighborhoods, homogeneous neighborhoods. We look at the neighborhood, what are properties selling for? We do it using mass appraisal. It's not the same as single property appraisal, whereby you send out the appraiser, the bank's looking for mortgage, or you're looking for, for some other reason. It's not the same as that. So a lot of people think it's the same, but it's not. We use mass appraisal. All right, Andrew. 3 approaches to determining value that we use. By far the most common is a sales comparison approach. So for most residential properties, we look at the sales in that neighborhood, in that town, in that municipality, in that area whereby you have similar properties. And based on what those properties and what the sales data tells us, that's how we set the assessed values. So we look at all the sales, assessed values or the sales values are moving in a certain direction. That's the direction that your assessed values will be moving in across the neighborhood for similar properties. Not all properties move the same. Some properties are a little different in that they have different characteristics, different sales. Sales may tell us that these older homes are selling more or less than other homes. Maybe the newer homes are different as well. The income approach, basically we use that. We determine the income that a property can earn. That's how they transact, how much the cash flow, the net profit, and sort of the discount rates that they apply in order to determine the values of those properties. We convert that net income into a market value based on the data that we receive. Things such as apartment buildings, things such as retail shopping malls where you've got strip malls, things such as office buildings where they transact based on how much income or rent is earned on those properties. And we have the cost method, which we calculate the land value and the current cost to replace the building, and then we deduct the depreciation, mainly for industrial type properties or unique properties where you don't have a whole lot of transactions happening. Andrew? And we look at data from all kinds of sources. We'll look anywhere that we can find data, whether it be from the municipality here, whether it's from real estate listings, whether it's from talking to property owners, or we do field inspections. Our assessors are out all the time in the field looking at properties. And common questions about sales. Are all sales considered in your analysis? All sales that we consider a qualified market sale as opposed to a non-market sale, like a market sale would be an arm's length transaction. Willing buyer, willing seller, no undue influence on that buyer or seller. So if we consider it a market sale, we'll use it in the analysis. When a house sells, does the price become its assessed value? Not necessarily. It may be an indication of what the market value of that house is, but it doesn't necessarily become the assessed value. We look at the values of all the properties in the area. If you consider COVID, the COVID period that we went through, you might say that many of the houses were overpriced because people were see undue influence or those types of factors whereby somebody felt pressured to put that higher price on there. It may not have been the market price, but people were bidding up prices. So was that market price? So not necessarily the selling price is the market price. How are market areas determined? Homogeneous local neighborhoods. Town of Wolfville probably divided into 8 neighborhoods possibly. Commercial, certain residential types, newer neighborhoods, that type of thing, homogeneous neighborhoods. What happens when you don't have enough sales in the market area? Essentially, we may broaden our scope a little bit, look at a little bigger market area, find areas that are similar that would have homes that have sold and glean from that information and that data as to which way market values are going. And why can neighborhood or street have a different assessed values, neighborhoods and streets? Typically, the data characteristics would be different and the sales would be telling us something different. That's why they may be a different value. I went through that very quickly. There's a lot of information there. Roll quality standards. I won't worry about that one too much. I think that Laura can make the presentation available to you if you want to know a little bit more about roll quality standards. I'll certainly be willing to talk to any of you about it for sure. And the capped assessment program, we administer that as I had indicated. It places a cap on the amount that the taxable assessment for residential properties can increase every year. There's no allowance in the cap for decreases in residential properties. So the cap will not go down. You may lose the cap if you're no longer eligible, but there's no allowance for the cap to go down. It's just for increases. It protects against increases, dramatic increases in prices, as some prices similar to what we saw through the COVID period. That's some of the dates we're talking about, the important dates. January 1st, 2024 is the market date for the 2025 assessment. We actually consider the physical state of the property just before the roll goes out on December the 1st. So 1 month ago, we would have, we were leading up to that. We're looking at permits, doing inspections, adding any new construction right up to the point of when we could prepare that roll. Then we send the roll out. We sent the roll out on December 7th to the municipalities, all the municipalities. And the notices, as I mentioned, were mailed out yesterday. So to get to the sort of the meat of the issue here is the assessment roll for Wolfville for this year. So the 2025 assessment roll is 1.1 billion, give or take a few thousand here or there. That is comprised of the residential property assessment, which was 903 million in total assessed value over 1,719 accounts. Now, the residential assessed value with the cap, because we are valuing at market value, that higher number of 903 million is the market value assessment of all those properties. But once you take into consideration the cap, the impact of the cap, it's 713 million, and 1,109 properties are eligible for the cap out of that 1,709 properties. So essentially, I guess to bring it back to some comparative numbers, the overall residential lift based on market was up 11.4% for Wolfville this year. That compares to the height of COVID, where they were at, the lift was around 18 in 2023 and 16% in 2024. Prior to COVID, in 2021, the residential lift was 1.7%. So that COVID bubble went through and is starting to somewhat, move back towards the more normal levels. So 11.4% on residential lift, overall market lift this year. But the more important number for your budget in respect to when you're doing your budgets is the actual residential taxable assessed value, which is the cap adjusted assessed value. It was up 7.7% this year. Now, the reason the number is quite different is that the cap this year was 1.5%, which was the consumer price index for Nova Scotia. So essentially, rather than having those properties increase by the market value, it increases by the cap, which is 1.5%. So on all of those properties that were cap eligible, the value of the property, not including any permits or any other improvements or so on that were made. But essentially, if nothing else was done, those properties would have increased by 1.5% rather than what the market would have told us, which would have been a higher number. That's why the cap number is lower. So, and just as comparison, through COVID, the CPI was 5.4%, 7.7%, 3.2%, and now down to 1.5% for this year. So you see a little bit of that that upward movement and then sort of settling back down a little bit. The commercial taxable lift for the commercial properties this year is plus 1.3%. You'll see you've got an assessment of 223 million on total assessed value on commercial over 170 accounts. The taxable lift, like I say, 1.3%. Through COVID, it was in the 5s, upwards to 9%, back down to 5, and now 1.3% for commercial. All right, so a little bit of the activity for Wolfville. We had 43 permits leading up to the 2025 roll, 86 property transactions, sales, essentially, and 49 appeals. Now, appeals totals also went up during that COVID period, as you can appreciate, because the values were going up quite hot, significantly higher during COVID. So we actually had 15 appeals prior to COVID, and that would have been maybe 15, 20 for Wolfville along the way. 2022, we had 61. 2023, we had 92. And for 2024, we had 49. So it's starting to move back down a little bit more towards that normal level. So for 2025, with the 1.5% cap, I think that you're going to see it moving more again towards the normal levels that we would have seen prior to COVID. So the appeal process, it starts now. Each property owner receives their notice, which indicates the assessed value. Should the property owner disagree with their assessed value, they can file an appeal. 2025 assessment appeals must be received by us by February 3rd, by midnight on February 13th. Sorry, I misspoke there. By midnight, February 13th. They have 31 days from the date that we mail out the notices to property owners. And the instructions on how to file the appeal are on their notice. It's really quite easy. They just need to really sign it. That's the important part. The property owner has to sign it and send in their sort of grounds for appeal, which can be simply, I don't agree with the value or something along that line. So anyways, there are 3 levels of appeal. Initially, when the appeal comes to us, we have our initial assessor review. The assessor will take a look at that. Andrew's very much involved in that for sure. And they will take a look at that. They'll talk to the property owner in most cases and discuss with them and then decide whether to confirm that value or whether to amend that value. And sometimes property owner, after talking to us, will decide to withdraw their appeal. A lot of times it relates to the cap, and once they understand how the cap works, they may withdraw their appeal. If they are dissatisfied with that, with the decision by PVSC after that initial appeal review, they can take their appeal or submit it to the Nova Scotia Assessment Appeal Tribunal. That's the NSAT Tribunal, whereby an independent chair will hear the review and they will decide upon what the appropriate value will be. That's independent from PVSC. Essentially, the appellant or the property owner has standing in order to give their reasons why they feel the value should be different. And PVSC will be there, one of our assessors or someone such as Andrew will be there to say why PVSC thinks the value is a good value for that assessment. And the independent chair will decide after a period of deliberation. If they're still unsatisfied with the NSAT hearing decision, they can take it to the UARB or the Utility Review Board. That's a much more formal process. And when you compare it to the number of properties we have and the number of appeals we initially get, very few actually go to the UARB process because it is quite a formal and can be quite costly to go there, as you well know. All right, Andrew. And finally, our contact information, if you have any property owners that are asking you questions that you don't feel comfortable answering, or just if you just wish them to forward or have them come talk to us, that's probably the preferred method. Have them give us a call. They can email us. They can go to our website to get a lot of information that may answer their own questions as well. But I would certainly encourage you, if you're talking to any property owners, have them call us first and we'll certainly explain. We'll talk to them about their assessment and so on and so forth. And we'll go from there. And I thank you very much. And we'll take questions, and hopefully I didn't take too much. Hopefully I wasn't too much over the allotment.
Thank you very much, Paul. It is always an interesting time of the year for homeowners, for sure. I'm just going to open it up to see if anybody has any questions for either Paul or Andrew. Palmer?
I've got a question regarding cap and how that works, and maybe this is a Beth question as much as it is for you. But okay, so I've got a property that I've owned for 20 years and it's been capped, and I sell it for, and it's capped at $250,000. I sell it for $1 million. What does that affect for when I said you value it at 900,000? I'm going to pay taxes on a 900,000 now this year, or when do I start paying taxes on the 900,000?
I'm going to pass this over to Andrew, and he deals with this every day, so he's best one to give you that answer. Although I could answer it, but not as good as answering it.
Yeah, so if you bought that property or today, it would be for next year's taxes, right? So next year you'll pay on that 900,000. The cap value doesn't go forward unless it's a family transaction. If you had bought that property from a relative, then you would be able to keep the cap. But if it's just a regular transaction, then you lose, and you would pay on what that market value is for the following year. Yeah. So so anything that's sold this past year, right? It automatically goes to market, and then that's what they would pay on, not the cap value.
Councillor Van Niekerk?
I just have a follow-up to that. So then once it becomes valued at the 900,000 and he pays tax on that, it then re-enters the cap and is continued to be capped.
So if it transacted in 2024,
Yeah.
for 2025, you're not eligible for the cap that first year. So it'll go to market, and then the following year you'll be
Back in the cap.
back into the program, right? Assuming you live here more than half the year. If you do any new construction, like that could be added to the cap too, right? So you may still not get the cap. Let's say you bought the house and then built a new garage or something like that. You could potentially still not be in it, right? Because the new construction could make that value higher, but you're automatically put in. You don't have to apply or anything like that. It is automatic for the following year.
In your numbers that you presented with respect to Wolfville, there were like 1,000 that were in the uncapped area zone. Is that because those are the houses that have done transactions that are in that, or what? How have we ended up with that many houses uncapped? I'm just wondering.
So potentially it could be all the ones that transacted, but there could be that the capped assessment would have worked out to be higher than the market value. So then you get basically valued at the lesser of the two. So let's say they were close in assessment from the previous year, the market and the capped. So that cap value could technically go over top of the market. In that case, it would just go straight back down to market, right? So, and in those other properties could be, people that have, they live outside of the province, so they don't have the cap, right? So those would be included in there. Different accounts that don't qualify. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think the other thing in particular with Wolfville is any apartment buildings that were over 4 units, over 3 units, isn't it? It's 3 or fewer are eligible for the cap if they meet all the other eligibility requirements. Like businesses cannot own a residential property and be capped. So some of them may be owned by businesses or numbered companies or so on and so forth. Some may be non-Nova Scotia residents. and don't meet the 183 day a year test for Nova Scotia residency. Some may be condos that are not owner occupied. Condos have to be owner occupied. So there are a number of eligibility criteria, but of the improved residential properties in Wolfville, before COVID, you were running around 70% of those properties were capped. And now you're at 81%, been running at 81% for the past 3 years. The fact that market values went up appreciably through COVID, I guess, allowed the cap to kick in for more properties in the town of Wolfville. And that's what we see across the province. Anywhere from 80 to 90% typically is what the percentage of capped improved residential property, those properties with dwellings on them, 80 to 90% are capped. Wolfville's 80%. I suspect some a little lower, probably because of transactions, market transactions, also apartments, and also ownership by non-individuals such as companies and those types of things.
I guess just, do you think it would be possible to receive like a follow-up with sort of what that eligibility is? That list of things, is that something that you could provide?
Certainly. Yep.
Great.
I'll
So
provide that through to Laura, and I'll give her a little bit of a summary on that, and maybe she can forward it through to everybody here on council.
And commercial is not, there's no cap for commercial. This only applies to residential, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
I have a couple other questions not related to cap. So I just wanted to check if anybody else had any cap related questions before I ask my other ones.
I just have one quick one. I
Okay,
think
right.
but property, land itself is not capped, correct?
Land can be capped, residential land.
Most cases it is, right?
Yeah.
Unless it's in a business name, it is capped, if you're eligible for it, right?
Yes.
If you owned it for 20 years and you got an $80,000 parcel that you had, they're into the program, right? They're into the program, so they could potentially still be capped at, 50 or 60,000, right? Under that. Yep.
I think the other thing is that a property owner can have multiple properties that are capped as well. It's not like primary residence type of thing, and that if they have land, cottages, a primary residence, they can all be eligible for cap.
Are there any more cap questions? Nope. Go ahead.
Can you talk a little bit about what your involvement is and what the process is from your end if you have, for example, a residential property that's happens to be located in a commercial zone, and that residential property were to move to a commercial business, or it would become a commercial business in operation? How does that process work from your end to change that taxation, or to change I guess, the labeling and the assessment process?
The first thing that would trigger that would be a permit on that account for us to know that that's happening. So in this case, is it a house that's kind of sitting in a commercial neighborhood, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if the permit was, let's say we're putting in a boutique, like a flower shop or something like that into that place, then we would go inspect the property and revalue. If it's just a portion, let's say it's just the main level that's a commercial business, we might apply 50% commercial on that building for the main level, and maybe you still have apartments up on the second level. So we come out and verify that information. If it's all a business, then we would change that all over to a commercial taxable.
And where does that permitting happening? Is that happening through the town here, or?
Through the town.
With the
Yeah.
town?
As soon as it's pulled, so the property owner comes in, pulls the permit, we get that report, and then we come out and inspect, usually in the fall, once the work's further along, and make those adjustments for the following year.
Okay.
I'll just add a little to that in that I know in Wolfville here, we've had inquiries before as to someone has a business in their house, but it's not being captured as commercial or whatever. So we do get that and we do investigate, we do take a look to see. However, it's a pretty fine line as to, is it, is it significant commercial to the extent that we would apply a commercial classification to a part of that property? It can be difficult to determine, but we look at sort of the preponderance of the evidence of what we can see. Is there signage? Is there a separate entry? Is it causing traffic? Is it advertised? Those types of things. If it's someone with a single chair in their basement, doing salon work or hair cutting or something like that, and it's not overtly commercial, then that's tough for us to go in and say we better put a commercial. Someone has a home office, no, but it has to be overt. It has to be fairly obvious, and so we do get questions about that for sure. And it is a very good question. It can be tough. It's in the opinion of the assessor based on all the evidence that we see.
Councillor Williams?
Is Airbnb considered commercial? And if not, why not?
The quick answer is it depends. And I'm going to let Andrew talk a little bit more.
So it's based on the number of rooms that it has. I believe if it's 4 rooms or more, then it would be considered commercial, because that's no different than like a motel, right? More than 4, right? And if it's less than that, then it would still stay residential.
So 4 residential, 5 commercial.
Commercial.
And that's for anything less than 30 nights, right?
It just has to do with,
Or what's the,
It's overnight accommodation, I think the wording is not, it doesn't set a date of how many nights. So it is short stay accommodation, it's overnight accommodation. It's short stay accommodation. It's a short stay accommodation, Tourist Accommodation Act. It's overnight stays. It's less than 4 beds available for more, less than 4 rooms available for rent, bedrooms. So while it's written fairly simply and precisely in the legislation, you can see where there's potential for gray areas as to what's a bedroom and what's not a bedroom and how many nights. But typically, if you're renting out from week to week or month to month, that would probably be considered like a normal rental and not subject to the Airbnb sort of act or whatever, although Airbnbs can be rented out for 7 nights in a row, but they're renting them on a nightly or overnight accommodation basis. So similar to commercial businesses or commercial use in a residence, we need to take a look at each Airbnb pretty much to see how many rooms there are. And once again, a person can own an Airbnb here with 3 rooms. They can own the next property beside it with 4 rooms. They can own the next property beside it with 2 rooms. If they're all on separate parcels, then they're all separate Airbnbs. So you can have someone out there that owns that has a website and has 50 rooms, but they're all in separate properties, or they're under 4, then each of those can be its own separate, and it would be considered residential until you're over 4 rooms for overnight accommodation. So it kind of, if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck, but sometimes it's hard to tell.
yeah, thank you. Actually, I had one more question. Can I go one more? When you were talking about the appeals process, I guess, could you just elaborate like what would be kind of a pitfall of someone doing that appeals process? Like, is there why doesn't everybody just appeal? Like, what's the downside to doing that?
Well, the downside, I guess, would be more in just the administration. It would require to do it, but for any individual property owner, I would like to think if they felt that their assessed value was fair, that they would be fine with that and not appeal. But people can appeal. There's no pitfall. There's no fee. There's no major amount of work you have to do in order to appeal. If they just feel for some reason that they, I would discourage just appealing, for the sake of appealing, but they can. The reality is in Nova Scotia legislation allows it. So there's no pitfall to appealing.
There's no risk that it's going to jump up higher in the second year.
Well, I see where you're going. Typically on appeal, we would not. We would only look at the year in appeal on the property that we have right there at that time. If we find that there's a lot different from that property than what we have for data, the following years, there may be an adjustment to it. Or Andrew, do you want to, it would be rare. I'll put it that way.
Right, that's fine.
Yeah,
I think,
Andrew,
I won't
It's
speak anymore.
usually when a property transacts and it sells, like they pay 500 and we're assessed at 400 and they appeal it. And then we look at it and it's, maybe we haven't even reviewed the sale yet. We could be missing the basement finish or something like that.
Yeah,
And maybe in those instances, but very rarely. that
all right,
happens.
thank you.
Yeah.
That's it.
Thank you. Director Lake?
Is this one on? Yeah, so I just have I just want to ask you kind of a scenario question about Airbnb, just something that I deal with in my office as the director of planning. So we have what would be like more traditional inns in town. They're varying sizes. Some of them would be quite substantial, and they're clearly commercial properties that we would have on our commercial tax roll. And as that is sort of evolving, we've had people come in and buy quite substantial single family homes. And these could be like REITs out of Calgary, or, it's a very like diverse investment landscape, people that are calling us about these things because the potential income is significant compared to long-term rentals. So when you say the 4 less rooms, what I face is traditional inn owners coming to us and saying, I know this entire home is it's clearly not residential. I mean, we can get into semantics on what an inn and a hotel and all this stuff is, but really it's a hotel, right? So it's an entire home that's being rented exclusively. And it may only be technically 3 bedrooms. So is the only metric you're using when you're looking at, when you call homogeneous neighborhoods, surely you're comparing apples to apples on commercial assessments, so there's an element of fairness. So is the only thing you're looking at is the number of rooms, or is there a place here to submit, as you say, evidence or other things? Because you can imagine the gap that creates in the housing market because of the potential income that an entire house is valued at. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the legislation is what we follow, but I'll let Andrew speak to it a little bit.
So any of those properties that transact, we have to review those sales to determine. If we determine that there's more rooms being rented than that and it's got that income, like at some point it could be an apartment, right? More of an income driven property that transacts maybe a little bit higher. So that review would be done, and maybe that property could be revalued on income where it turns into more of an apartment, because some of those big larger homes that have 7 or 8 apartments in them, right, that they kind of convert over to apartments. But are you more or less speaking to just like the three units and less, or 3 rooms and less?
There's a lot of different scenarios, right? Like this is the thing about, older pieces of legislation that have a single metric in them, that they're not responding to where the market's coming in, and where we're in a housing crisis, we're being pressured by the province to create housing. So it's put us in an awkward position when, from my seat, we also have clear legislation to create zoning and land use requirements. And so if we're asking someone to come in and pull a permit for something that we're calling commercial, and we have a definition in our land use bylaw that it is commercial, but it's not corresponding because you have a single, what I would say is not a very sophisticated metric. Like if 3 rooms or more could mean a lot of things. But in a neighborhood, when, as you say, it's a homogeneous neighborhood and you stick in a hotel, which is really what is happening, that's a different problem for us to deal with. And so this has been an ongoing thing in a lot of municipalities. A lot of planning directors in our discussions are talking about this. The province in their housing discussions are talking about this. So I think, I would just pass that on to you as a tricky situation that we're trying to deal with. And I don't think the metric that you're describing is really reflective of what's happening in the market. I think it's more complicated than that.
And maybe what we can do, we'll take a look at that and maybe we'll touch base, kind of going forward. We'll look into it a little bit more and kind of give a better explanation too, right?
Yeah, and I think you're right, Devin, that your descriptions as commercial and your municipal bylaw, land use bylaws and things like that, your definitions of commercial versus the Assessment Act definitions of what commercial may not align, and it causes some trickiness as to what's permitted in your area. So excuse my back, by the way. The Assessment Act's pretty clear that we assess based on the use of the property, what it is currently being used for. So at any particular time, as at what's called the state date, December the 1st, prior to the assessment going out, if the property is being used and it fits into the category of Airbnb, that's what we put it on as a commercial property. If it's one of these Airbnbs that's over four rooms for rent, for instance, if it's under that, the use fits the legislation as residential versus commercial, which may be a little different than what you envision in the land use bylaws. So there are those areas whereby they don't match for sure. And, I guess it would require legislative changes to the Assessment Act whereby it matches more up with what you're sort of looking at or whatever. But yes, there are times when it's difficult to understand why this is being assessed as residential when we think it's commercial, and we do get those types of questions quite often. So I don't know if that answers the question or not, but it's not real straightforward. That's part of the use, yes. That's part of the use, in that how many rooms are being used, what's the use of the property, what's the ownership, all those things we look at and determine, okay, does it fit into residential? Does it fit into commercial? Or does it fit into resource? Those are the only three options we really have, or a combination of the two. So if it doesn't meet the commercial definition under the act, if it doesn't meet the residential definition under the act, and it doesn't meet the resource definition under the act, it defaults to commercial. That's the one that is kind of the catch-all, is commercial. So if it's not residential, if it's not resource, it's commercial. But under the act, it defines what residential is as far as, the act, which may not quite align with sort of what you think may be commercial versus residential. Yes, oh yes, it's every municipality. We get these questions from all municipalities as to why is this commercial, why is it?
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Oh, I can see this is going to be a really fulsome discussion, and thank you for all the information. I do request Director Lake that we bring this back to our Planning Advisory Committee for a little bit more fulsome discussion, because I can see that we're probably going to be, asking many, many questions. It seems it's a very hot topic. So I didn't mean to cut you off or anything.
Could be,
but we could
total
talk.
agenda item.
Yeah, it could be a whole item, and we do have other stuff on the agenda. So I do want to thank Paul and Andrew for coming in today and explaining all that and taking all of our questions. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So moving right along. I'm looking at Director Hopkins for some information report on the financial update, quarterly year-to-date financial update. I think you're in the hot seat for the next little few ones. Am I correct? I think you're in the hot seat for the next little bit.
So for the next component, for Cow, there was an information report 019-2024, presenting the Q2 financial results along with variance reporting as well. The report was presented to the audit committee on December the 6th. I think there may be a follow-up on the committee presentations this morning as well. I don't have a presentation per se. It's simply the information is as it was reported on the information report. Should any councillors or council member or the mayor have questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Overall, we're in a very positive financial position. We were actually above budget by $1.3 million. Revenues were up by about $214,000, reflective of additional interest earned, as well as an increase in property in the deed transfer tax. Deed transfer tax was the largest increase. It was about $183,000 over plan. Expenditures, we were significantly lower by about $1.1 million. The largest component of that is reflective of the RCMP. We had the RCMP present at the last Cow in December and explain that we had budgeted 9 full-time constables. We had 7.75 constables. In addition to that, we're not having the same volume of overtime that we've had year over year. It's given us about a $500,000 punch in the arm on a positive nature for contracted services. So that makes up the largest component, in addition to the revenues that we've earned over and above what we expected, because our interest rates were pretty healthy in the first 2 quarters of 24-25.
Yeah, this is just a report. I'm fortunate enough that I did attend the last audit meeting, so things are a little bit more clear. So anybody that wants to have a little bit more discussion, please attend the audit meetings to listen to that. So I just open it up to any questions. I see Mayor McKay, your light is on.
Thank you. Thanks for that explanation, Beth, on the contract. Oh, mine doesn't work. This one, sorry. Maybe I should take that as a hint to be quiet. Thank you for that on the police, because that was one of my questions. And my other question is on contracted services, on a lot of other things as well. Because typically contracted services are things that we don't have expertise for in-house, which then means it affects the projects that we are going to be doing. This is the time we'd be tendering all the things coming up for the spring and summer now. So is that work not done so we can't tender? So where are we sitting, and
no,
where are we
so
sitting
just
capital-wise?
the timing of the actual, because we were late getting the budget through last year, and the tendering hadn't been done. There's a lot of road repair that falls into contract services under Public Works as well. That work has been completed to date. It had not been necessarily billed and completed as of the end of September. So we're actually, we're into January, so we're reporting somewhat later, Q2 September 30th versus December 31st. So that work has since been, and I think it's around $300,000, Alex, that was actually executed within that last quarter. As far as the work was already in progress, but some of the stage billing hadn't been done, nor had it been paid. So it just wasn't in the GL as of yet.
Any other questions? I don't see any. So should I put the motion on the floor for our D059? Or do I want Beth just to talk first? Put the motion on the floor? Okay, Ian, all up to you.
Where are we here? No, that's auditor. That's auditor.
That was just the.
Well, it's just a report.
Yeah,
Oh,
we did, so we're moving
Yeah.
on to the.
Okay, so now we're done, moved on. Okay. In reference to RFD 059-2024, appointment of auditor fiscal 2024 for a year fiscal
No, no.
2020, no?
No, that's the wrong motion.
Motion, that's an information report.
Yeah, so we don't have one.
No, that's.
Great, so we're just gonna put this on the floor and then we can discuss.
The auditor on the floor and then I'm gonna open it up for questions. Is
Okay,
that-
sorry.
is that the Correct process that, okay, thank you.
My apology.
So to be clear, we're just not going to accept we're just going to accept the report. We're not going to vote on it, correct? Yeah. Okay. So, yes. So in reference to RFD 059-2024, appointment of auditor for fiscal year 2024-25, I would move that the committee of the whole forward the following motion to council for decision. The council appoint Grant Thornton as the town's auditor for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2025.
Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Williams, thank you. I'll open it up to questions. I'm sorry. We're all kerfuffled because we had an information report and there was no motion. No, I got It doesn't take much. Everybody's looking around.
That's not the
Yeah,
right.
I will allow you present and then we'll ask questions afterwards. Thank you.
So the auditors had been appointed, excuse me, in 2019 for 4 years. They were given an additional year where I was new to the director seat with Miss Director McLean retiring, which added some continuity to the financial effort as far as creating an audit package. In addition to that, Grant Thornton also prepared our financial statements. So there were two components to what Grant actually executed last year. They did both the year-end audit as well as the preparation of the financial statements. The financial statements are not considered part of the audit. They're actually considered a consultation engagement with Grant Thornton. Overall, audit fees came in at $40,000 last year. The financial statements were about $28,000, which was unexpected, but there was no linkage or no previous reports that were that finance was able to clearly pull and feed in, and so it was certainly beneficial for me coming in February and those being prepared in May, basically. We would like to have another year with Grant Thornton to continue that continuity, to be able to utilize their working papers, to learn from what they've learned in creating those financial statements as well. We've had conversations, several conversations with the partners at Grant Thornton and the senior manager that we've been working with as well. And I think we have a strong relationship there. We've gone through kind of the kinks over the last year. I think it would be remiss if we changed auditors because there's going to be such an incredible investment in town staff time as well as auditor time when you do convert to a new firm, that I think it would be beneficial, and I'd recommend that we would hold on to Grant Thornton for one more year before we go out to an RFP.
Thank you. Now I'll open it up to questions. Mayor McKay.
Habits, old habits die hard. Just one question. I do think that's good, is a good idea. I think that continuity is important. When Grant Thornton does the working papers, is that their intellectual property, or do we actually get to own the working papers afterwards?
It's their intellectual property, but they provide us copies of it, electronic copies of it. They'll provide us. The biggest thing for what I like to utilize once we have the audit is what's called mapping, which simply maps the GL and it gives all the detailed transactions. And then we can reconcile it to an internal financials, which is very useful. The auditors had a couple new groups, but we had a continuity with the partner as well as with the senior manager. We have that same continuity going into this year end, which would be really beneficial for staff. For town staff here. One comment I do want to make, which was brought up at the audit committee, and it was a concern of many of the members. Based on the Procurement Act, or procurement policy, excuse me, should we reach a threshold of more than $50,000, that audit would have to go to the RFP process. We don't foresee that happening. We would like this decision to be passed simply because it will give Grant Thornton the opportunity to come in and do an interim Auditors normally come in and do 2 weeks in term prior to year end, which kind of gives them a little bit bolster before the year end is complete. And again, it helps on availability and resources at the end of the year. And it prepares us for any testing that may create, additional investigation on our part as well. So it's very helpful, and we'd like to get them in as soon as possible. But there was that threshold that where last year they were 40,000. What's the guarantee that they will be 50,000 or less than 50,000? Jessica and I have had conversations at length. They've been very, very good to us. They forgave some of their audit fees last year because it was such an arduous audit. And they have a particular threshold that, provided we're within that profitability threshold for them, that they can have a little bit better than break even, they're willing to work with us. And I know that that would be something that they would not be going over the $50,000. I can almost guarantee it.
Maybe from the audit chair, as chairman of the audit committee, I'll just comment on that. We did have quite a discussion on whether or not we'd break the 50,000 and whether we'd be outside of policy. But I think that the agreement or the thought was that we would go to tender for next year.
Correct.
Are there any more questions? No? The motion is on the floor. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? And that is carried. All right. Ian, would you like to put the next motion on your floor?
In reference to RFD 0602024, readoption of revised policy number 121-011, signing authority policy. I would move that the committee of the whole forward the following motion to council for decision. The council approve the revised policy number 120-011, signing authority policy as attached to RFD 060-2024.
Thank you. Can I have a second?
I'll second that.
Councillor Butler, thank you. Now, Director Hopkins. Go ahead.
So signing authority is something that we need within the organization in order to be compliant and have internal controls on the stewardship of the funds within the organization. This simply identifies who has signing authority and to what level, financial level, that they have signing authority. The only changes that were put in place in that particular policy were the titles of 2 individuals. Everything else remains the same. And again, I would recommend that council approve that policy as stated.
Are there any questions for Director Hopkins? Seeing none, the motion is on the floor. All those in favor? And that is carried. We're moving right along. Ian or Councillor Palmer, do you want to continue on?
In reference to RFD 061-2024, readoption of policy number 120-08, travel, meals, and miscellaneous allowance policy, and policy number 120-1-016, hospitality policy. I would move that committee of the whole forward the following motion to council for decision. That council readopt policy number 120-008, travel, meals, and miscellaneous allowance policy as attached to RFD 061-2024.
Can I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Elliott.
The travel policy was revised back in September of 2024. It was brought to council. Council made the approval, did approve the change in policy. This is a readoption that we have to go through every January following a new election with new council members. Just to bring to your attention, the principal changes within that policy were the addition of per diems, meal per diems, which are stated amounts per meal within given requirements for eligibility for those meals. So for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Any questions? Mayor McKay?
Just a question. Did we at some point though have a discussion that the exceptional meeting? Oh, sorry. Did we have a discussion that exceptional meetings, and if someone was working and what those exceptional meetings were going to be looked at? Or was that a different policy and
think
not
that's-
this one?
I think that's the hospitality one that's coming up, is it not?
I think it was council related, and we said that every meeting that we listed in there didn't allow for any exceptional meetings, so it didn't actually do anything.
Yeah, so we still have to, review those particular items in that policy to make sure that they practically work.
So that will come back again.
Yes. Right.
CEO, is there anything you had to add? No, okay. Any more questions? The motion is on the floor. All those in favor? Aye. And that is carried.
Okay, so I guess I'm back to the same reference, aren't I?
Motion to.
Yeah. Okay, so I would move that, I guess I would move that Committee of the Whole forward the following motion to council for decision. The council readopt policy number 120-016, hospitality policy as attached to RFD 061-2024.
I'll second that.
Councillor Butler, thank you. Seconder, is there any question, or Beth, we'll leave it open to you if there's anything you want to say? Okay. Councillor Palmer, do you have a question at all, or no? Okay, I don't see any questions, so the motion is on the floor. All those in favor?
Aye.
And that is carried unanimously. Right, we're moving right along. We are into public comments. Is there anyone in the gallery or anyone online that would like to speak? Now that the mic is set up, I'll ask if there's anyone here that would wish to speak. And I will check with Laura if there's anyone online, and there's no one online. Okay, okay, so I guess we don't have any public comment today. So moving right along. The next item is the CEO report, and I'll turn that over to our CEO.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll just highlight a couple of items from our CAO report. First, our winter parking regulations are now in place. Thankfully, we haven't had a significant opportunity to use them just yet, but knock on wood, that continues. But just to share for the committee's awareness, we have early in the season reviewed our process and protocols for communication of anticipated winter storms. So when we know, we've got a little bit of warning as to what's going to be coming in advance. We've gone over our process with Public Works and Communications to ensure that we can communicate that out as early as possible. On the Parks Planning and Urban Forest item, I just want to draw to the committee's attention the work that's been progressing on the multi-use path that will top the Bishop Bethwick and Grand Prairie dike walls. That's a provincial project that we've been engaged with. So that is moving forward, and staff and councilors have been involved at the committee level to move that project along. It's not moving with as much urgency as we thought it might a few months ago. The timelines for that from the province have now extended out by a few months. So that gives us an opportunity at the staff level to do a little bit more planning and see what agreements might need to be put in place related to requests for maintenance and how that might integrate into other town plans as we move forward as well. On the community development and recreation side of things, pointing out a pilot project that we're collaborating on for Recreation Month in June 2025. So staff from the town of Wolfville, Village of New Minas, and town of Kemptville are collaborating and coordinating on a series of widespread programs and events all throughout that month, focused on biking, outdoor education, and try it programs and other things. So I'm really excited to see what comes from that. On the community planning side of things, we had a great visit with our partners and the folks who coordinate the Housing Accelerator Fund from CMHC just prior to Christmas. Staff from Wolfville, the staff from CMHC joined us here in Wolfville, and we're taking on a bit of a tour of the town to see some of the initiatives that were already in place and what other initiatives were coming forward with our various plans. Also, some much needed and exciting news. Staff are working with Rick Hansen certified architect Lisa Tondino, sorry, tripped over that a little bit, of the Houdini Design to complete accessibility assessments of washrooms here at Town Hall, at Public Works, a Recreation Center, and Railtown. And so those assessments will be completed in the coming months and will be part of a plan provided to council going forward to look at some accessibility upgrades to the various washrooms in those locations. Stormwater management project has been initiated with CBCL, so that's at the staff level, and they're currently looking into surveying and doing an inventory around some of the known stormwater challenges and the known stormwater infrastructure that we have in place in the town right now. And also from Engineering and Public Works in response to some growth in the Woodman Grove area, we will be looking at a study related to traffic calming infrastructure improvements in that area in the spring of the year. We've also added, again, this is a new piece for the last couple of months, we've added responses to public input from both the last committee of the whole and the most recent council meeting in your package. I won't go over those, but again, to highlight that those are there. And that's still a bit of a work in progress to make sure that we get that piece dialed in as best we can. And then finally, it gives me, I'm very excited to introduce the two newest members of the Wolfville staff who are here joining us here today. Krista Rayfuse is our new project manager in Engineering and Public Works. Welcome, Krista. And Dawson Sheehy has recently started as our Senior Manager of Operations in Engineering and Public Works. Welcome, Dawson. Yeah. So council, the committee will have a little bit of an opportunity if we take a break here in a little bit to chat and meet both Krista and Dawson. But very excited to welcome them both to the team.
Thank you. I'll open the floor up if there's any questions to CEO Horn.
Go ahead.
I was just wondering if you could elaborate on the work that's being done around the stormwater project and like how the survey is being conducted.
Yeah, I cannot elaborate about the work being done on the stormwater project, but maybe Alex, do you have a mic nearby that you can chat about?
At this point, we're still in conversations with CBCL to define the project scope. As I've mentioned before, it's not a straightforward project, and we want to make sure we're looking at the right things to get the right answers and the best plan for how we move forward on the project. So at this point in time, I'm waiting for a revised scope proposal from CBCL, and we'll likely be starting a detailed survey of the existing stormwater system this winter.
Oh, that's it.
Any other questions? Or Mayor McKay.
Sounds good. Just one question. When we have storms and there's a winter storm, can you elaborate a little bit on what the communication of that is? I think it goes out on social medias and what it does. I'm sure there's an internal communication on what happens. And is social media the only thing we're using? And secondly, I think it was last year, I had some input from businesses to say, their guests don't necessarily follow our social media, like our residents might, but their guests may not. And do we let, maybe, I'm not gonna say we're gonna let every business know, because that would be a lot, but maybe do we let the WBDC program director, I forget his exact title, director of programming, let him know so that he can disseminate that information so that we don't have guests being towed?
I'll let Barb start, then fill in some blanks.
Thank you. Through the chair to Mayor McKay. So we've been fine tuning our approach over the past number of years. So in advance of the winter parking regulations being activated, which is consistent, it happens every year. This is nothing new. So every year I feel we share this information with a few more people. So our messaging starts early around the need to secure legal parking spots, especially for overnight parking. And we target that to folks who have been parking on our streets. We reach out through landlords. We reach out through our business partners through the WBDC, giving this awareness. This is a great time to remind folks at the East End Gateway parking lot, the one across from Willow Park, you can park there overnight. You will not be ticketed. Of course, not for the entire season, but short stay overnight parking is permitted there. So we reach out to all of these partners, and we've also been successful again this year in directing folks who need legal parking through the winter months. They can secure a short-term parking pass from Acadia. So we have solutions available to folks. We do message this out, not just through social. It's posted in our kiosks. It's posted on the boards here. And then and it's on our website. So that information is consistent. It's always there. In advance of a storm, which we usually hear about from Dan Stovall, as does everyone in the region. So when we know that a storm is upcoming, what we do is we activate a site-wide notice. That is on every single page of our website. And that gives notice that we expect some bad weather. It has a hot link to our information page that outlines where you can and can't park, what to do if you don't have parking, and then also, unfortunately, what to do if you're looking for your car because maybe it's been towed. So we try and have all of that information in one place. We try and only tow as a last resort. Again, our priority is to keep the streets safe and passable. So if our operators cannot get a plow through a street, that's when we have to start thinking about, is ticketing enough, or do we need to have a vehicle removed? So we start strong at the beginning of the season, and we do certainly find that there will always be folks who aren't aware of this. That's really unfortunate. But I can confirm that over the holiday season, on a regular basis, I was receiving emails from folks in the community. A lot of those click here links on the website are directed to my email, and I try and look after those even through the holidays. So a lot of folks were reaching out saying, I have company, where can they park? Or I have company, there's a storm, where can they park? So again, it's this whole combination of communication channels that we use to ensure that the end result happens, and the end result is keeping our roads clear and passable, which requires all of those steps to happen.
Can I just add one additional piece of that? So Barb had mentioned our regional emergency management coordinator, Dan Stovall, sends notices out across the region related to known upcoming winter weather. So any business, any individual, any organization can actually sign up to receive those texts. We can circulate that sign up to our various channels so they can receive those as well. But rather than receiving them from the town at kind of closer to the time of a disruption, and again, most of our communication is going to be related to town operations. So winter parking regulations, whether facilities are open or closed, whether programming is going forward. That's what we will be focusing on. If they sign up to the regional emergency management center's email notifications, they will be getting the same information we get on their own, and they can determine for their own organizations as to what they need to do.
Councillor Palmer.
Just want to clarify something. Want to make sure that I get this straight. On the East End parking lot, we can park there during the snowstorm. Like if they're not allowing parking on the streets during a storm, we can park there. But that is designed as short-term parking. Can somebody define short-term parking for me?
So what we deal with is our compliance team do go through the parking lot on a fairly regular basis. So short term would be, maybe a few nights. If we have a concern about a vehicle that's parked there long term, compliance will leave a notice, just kind of that, maybe you should talk to us about finding some other alternative situations. We've had a number of opportunities to have to kind of remove vehicles from that area because of construction and safety requirements, lighting going in, all of those different things. So again, that's a chance for us to have a sense of, are people using that for longer stay parking, which is not the intention. But that overnight parking is available to persons and visitors at all times. So again, if the lot were filled and we were hearing from folks that they can't find parking, and we have lots of feedback coming in to suggest if there's an issue, but compliance are there on a regular basis.
Thank you.
And I just would like to highlight one last thing. We had Soups Inside last night and we were 102 with 45 minutes left. So Councillor Elliott and I were there last night. So it was a busy night. So great to see that kick off for January. And I just wanted to highlight January 27th is our listening session. So council will be at Soups and Sides on the 27th. So inviting all of the community out for us to hear what they have to say. Next week, we'll have our first kick at the can for budget. So we'll have some numbers and some ideas, but would really like to see a lot of people out on the 27th. And Asia's going to have to really get her soup on because it's going to be busy, I hope.
Well, I don't see any more questions. And who doesn't love soup this time of year? So, okay, so we're moving right along to internal committee reports. I'll look to Councillor Elliott. Does she have anything to add, or are there any questions from the Accessibility Advisory Committee?
Well, I thought it was going to be as presented, but I've been informed that I had the number wrong on the numbers of programs we've put out. Barb, I should say, has put out. So we're now working on our third. Is that correct, Barb? Yeah. So a lot of diligence going in there. So otherwise it's as presented.
Are there any questions? Oh, see, thank you. I look to Councillor Palmer for audit. Is there anything to add, or are there any questions?
No, as presented.
Okay, any questions? No, okay, thank you. I look to Councillor Butler for the RCMP Advisory Board. Is there anything to add?
As submitted.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Oh, that's good. We'll move on to external.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Just in terms of process, last night we had our first Equity and Anti-Racism Advisory Committee meeting, and I wasn't sure. I could have written a report at 5 o'clock this morning when I was up, but it will just move to the next. Fantastic.
I believe that's fine. That's fine, right? Yes, we'll just move it. Yeah. Otherwise, yeah. It wouldn't be submitted, but yes, that's right. Thank you for that question. Moving on to external reports, intermunicipal service agreement. I look to Mayor McKay. Is there anything to add? No. Any questions? Oh, sorry. Any questions? Councillor Elliott?
I just we've had communication regarding the app that King's Transit uses to let people know what's happening with the bus. And I was speaking with someone on Sunday who commutes to Berwick. And it's 2 hours if the bus is running at the right time. But sometimes this person has to wait an hour in the cold. I mean, there could not have been a worse time for this app to conclude its life. So I just wanted to reiterate that, if I may.
I can speak to that a little bit because we did have some feedback from an individual. I think a few of us got an email on that. So I did reach out to that individual on the app. It has, I guess, been known for quite some time that it was potentially going out. But the actual sort of D-date where that one died was just recently, and it'll take 4 to 6 weeks to get a replacement for it to come back on. So hopefully we'll be there by the end of January. There is a phone number and they are answering the phone at King's Transit, which I know was also a bit of a hit and miss in the past, but they are doing that quite diligently now. And there are updates on Facebook and their social media. I did speak to that individual who sent that email last night, and he said that communication is getting better. He was serving soup, was getting better. And the phone calls were being answered and their Facebook messages were good. And they seem to be doing a fairly decent job right now of staying on time. So thanks to King's Transit for that. And yeah, hopefully that app will be up and running and will be better than the last one because it wasn't actually fantastic to start with. So hopefully that upgrade will be most helpful for the users.
Thank you, Mayor McKay. And moving on to Councillor Palmater for Wolfville Business Development Corporation.
Really just as submitted.
All right, are there any questions for Councillor Palmater? No, seeing none. Thank you. And we're moving on. I guess we have public input again. Is that correct? We are going on. Okay. So I'm going to give anybody else that's in the gallery a second chance, or anyone online that would like to speak. No, nobody online, I'm assuming. No. Okay. I don't see anybody. We'll move right along. Should we have a break right now? Like a 5? So just take a break now and not, okay. So we're gonna just have, before we go to our in-camera section, we're just gonna take a quick 5-minute break. Thank you.
I know.
Thank you.
Who said we were?
Yeah.
Thank you. We are back. Sorry? Yes, yes, yeah. We are back, but we are headed into in camera, so I'd like to have a motion to move in camera.
We would adjourn to an in-camera meeting under section 22 2C of the Municipal Government Act, negotiations